Would I call you an economic populist? Is there daylight between you and President Trump? A lot of what I think of as populism, though, seems like it's almost diametrically opposed to certain aspects of capitalism. You have said we should raise corporate taxes in the past. If the former president wants to cut the 21% rate down to 15, I think. You said 28 or even higher.
Liberals to the left of him, populists on the right. CNBC host Joe Kernen is clearly panicking about the possibility of higher taxes on corporations and populist economic policies being implemented regardless of which administration comes into power. Now, here he is displaying that panic during an interview with Trump's VP pick, JD Vance.
A lot of what I think of as populism, though, seems like it's almost diametrically opposed to certain aspects of capitalism. And there are certain groups, and I don't even want to mention the name of it, but they claim you as a strict adherent to populism. I don't know if you know the group I'm talking about. You have said we should raise corporate taxes in the past. If the former president wants to cut the 21% rate down to 15, I think. You said 28 or even higher, that these big corporations deserve that.
Well, what I said is that we need to lower taxes on corporations that are creating jobs in this country and raise tariffs on corporations that are shipping jobs overseas and manufacturing overseas. Look, if you're trying to take advantage of Chinese slave labor and then use American markets to make a profit on your product, I do think, and I know Donald Trump thinks, that we should try to penalize these companies, but we want companies that are investing in America, hiring America, and creating good American jobs to thrive. But we have to recognize there's a fundamental difference between a national corporation that's creating good jobs in this country and a foreign corporation that's benefiting from Chinese slave labor.
This sounds like industrial policy that the Democrats get criticized for.
So Kernen obviously hates the idea of populism, economic populism, doesn't like the idea of higher taxes for corporations. But for the purposes of this discussion, I think that diving into tariffs is important, because I gotta be honest with you guys. Look, I know JD Vance has all sorts of issues, right? I hate what he says about women. I hate like this weird pressure to have kids. I hate like smearing people who decide against having children. I hate all of that. But what he says specifically in the context of this part of the discussion about tariffs, it sounds kind of appealing to me.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
So Cenk, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm going to break down the pro and anti-tariff position. And guys, it requires nuance. I know in politics, everybody says, oh, either this or this. No, the answer's somewhere in the middle here.
Right.
But what's interesting is Anna's about to tell you, Biden is on Vance's side.
Yes. Okay, so before we get to Biden, because I don't think most people know what Biden did with tariffs during his administration, I just want you to hear a concise explanation of what JD Vance's views on tariffs happen to be. Let's watch.
There's definitely some element of populism to it, because look, I do think that for 30 years in this country, we shipped a lot of good manufacturing jobs to places like East Asia. Now China makes some of the critical things that we need: antibiotics, prescription drugs, even, God forbid, the weapons that our troops would need if we went to war against a nation like China. So we have to be a little bit smarter about our own self-reliance as a nation. That is one departure, I think, between President Trump's vision and, frankly, 30, 40 years of failed leadership in this country. You want to allow American manufacturers to benefit from that cheap labor. Not only is it going to destroy good American jobs and wages, it's going to decimate our core manufacturing industry, which I think makes us less productive over time. The final and most important point is it makes us reliant on foreign nations to make some of our critical stuff. Now, Donald Trump does believe in trade, and I believe in trade, but we believe in trade that's actually going to benefit American workers, not destroy American jobs.
So on messaging alone, I liked a lot of what JD Vance had to say there, and guess what? As Cenk alluded to earlier, so does Joe Biden, because he didn't repeal the tariffs that were implemented under Donald Trump. In fact, he decided to double down and add additional tariffs. Most people don't know about that, but let's discuss. So according to a really great piece written by Bob Davis in Foreign Policy, he writes that Biden made a decision that upended decades of Democratic White House rule. He ordered heavy new tariffs on Chinese imports of high-tech items and continued the massive tariffs he inherited from his Republican predecessor, obviously Donald Trump. And he continues to write that Biden's team includes people who spent decades campaigning for free trade and have now embraced protection or protectionism, including Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and Biden himself. So surprisingly, the Biden administration is the first since at least President John F. Kennedy's time to not even negotiate a new free trade deal, major free trade deal, which I didn't even know about, right? Trump actually did negotiate some free trade deals. Biden has not. And instead, he has embraced tariffs. Even Trump, the self-proclaimed tariff man, concluded a significant free trade pact when he replaced the North American Free Trade Agreement with a US-Mexico-Canada deal, USMCA, which toughened rules on auto imports, but also established liberal rules on digital trade. He also negotiated a smaller digital agreement with Japan. So that's like the slight differences between the two administrations. But the point that I'm trying to drive home here is that while on the debate stage, Kamala Harris attacked Donald Trump's tariffs, fact of the matter is the Biden administration actually doubled down on those tariffs, and it did not lead to inflation. And I have some evidence of that in just a second. So Trump negotiated, let's actually fast forward. So Biden also talked about the importance of manufacturing things here in the United States, as you heard JD Vance talk about. And he said it's important for our national security. It's important when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs. He said the following: my administration is combining investments in America with tariffs that are strategic and targeted, Biden said in May, explaining why he sought to block Chinese imports of electric vehicles, semiconductors, and other products deemed crucial to American security. Now, the big concern, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about this, Cenk, because Cenk has his analysis on whether or not tariffs would be a good or bad thing. But we entered this inflationary period, people are freaking out, and that was when Janet Yellen was like, we gotta get rid of the tariffs. We gotta get rid of the tariffs. And she was screaming from the mountaintops, get rid of the tariffs. I have analysis here that shows that it'll lower inflation by a significant amount. But it turns out that at the end of the day, the administration decided against going in that direction. And they even poured over the analysis that she provided, and they found, at most, getting rid of the tariffs would cut inflation by 0.25%. And then finally, by the end of 2022, Biden fought China by blocking exports of advanced manufacturing equipment and semiconductors to Beijing, while also revving up manufacturing here in the United States. And in many ways, that was a continuation of the Trump policy of seeking to deny advanced chips to Chinese companies. Finally, and then I'll go to you, Cenk, Bob Davis writes this: Biden won congressional approval to spend as much as $600 billion in the coming years to subsidize companies that build factories domestically to make semiconductors, electric vehicles, electric batteries, and other green technologies. So I'm actually optimistic and kind of excited about this effort to bring manufacturing back here to the United States, to have things actually built here. I do think it's important for our own safety, for our own health. I don't want our pharmaceutical drugs manufactured in other countries. I think we should have them manufactured here. And I want better jobs here, and this could be the pathway to that.
Okay, there's definitely caveats to that for me. But first I wanna say, look, if you're watching a show that tells you that either Biden or Trump is definitely right about tariffs and the other one is wrong, then you'll know you're watching the wrong show because they have a near identical position.
Exactly.
Okay, so now I don't know what the other shows are doing, but I'm just giving you that as a good guide because this is a perfect issue for you to be able to judge. Now I'll give credit to CNBC because I think they're the one other network that's principled and disciplined here. They hate any populism, anything that helps the average guy. They love anything that helps giant corporations.
Yep.
So whether you're on the left or the right, if you're a populist of any sort, Joe Kernen will attack you. Give me CNBC anchor versus anyone else on the planet, and I'll tell you that that other person is correct, okay? So that's your general rule on CNBC. All right, now, the ups and downs of tariffs. First, I'm generally a free trade anti-tariff guy, which is not a very populist position and not a very left-wing position. I'm being honest with you guys. The reason for that historically is because when you impose tariffs, it is anti-consumer. You can argue about how much it increases inflation, but it does increase inflation. It does increase prices, right? The question is how much, and depending on the circumstances. The second reason is it's a bad idea for the in the long run. So I remember in the 80s and 90s, Japan tried this to some degree, and I thought, I'm not worried about it at all. Why? Because when you produce things at a price that's too low, eventually you're either going to uplift your entire economy, which is what's happened to China over the course of the last couple of decades, and then your costs go up, and then now all of a sudden the jobs are moving to Malaysia and Vietnam, et cetera. That's not such a bad thing for the world, but it doesn't matter because then their prices come back up and the market balances itself. Or you do what Japan did, and they think, okay, we're gonna sell it for cheaper than you can afford and bankrupt your companies, and then we'll have the market. But no one's got enough money to do that on a global scale, except, as it turns out, the government of China, which now leads me to why my position is changing on this. Because when you have a position, it depends on the facts. So you apply the same calculus, but the facts change. So what's happened since then? Well, in the beginning, in the, again, 80s and 90s on free trade, then they start doing these trade deals right around then, where the government basically says, here, giant companies, you write the trade deals. And then what they started doing is, instead of fighting for the average American, they started doing trade deals where they demanded that China open up their financial markets to Goldman Sachs. Wait, how does that help us? You know why? Because Goldman Sachs was writing the trade deal. So then these trade deals were no longer free trade at all. So in order for them to be in any way, shape, or form fair, it had to be fair trade and have actual government officials are supposed to write it, not just hand it off. So that was great, huge problem, number one. Number two is, in the trade deals, they were not reciprocal. So they'd say, well, China, Mexico, India can pollute all they want, they can poison the rivers, et cetera, but America, you can't. No, it's gotta be reciprocal, okay? Hence, fair trade. So now you get to more modern day stuff. So now America has significant issues in some industries that Anna is constantly pointing out, and just did there as well. The semiconductor industry is a good example of that. So there are some things that are related to our national security and defense. So hey, China does a better potato chip, it doesn't affect anything. Let them just compete on price, no problem, right? But if they're making computer chips that are necessary for our missiles and our defense,
for literally every device.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah. Especially as it relates to defense, but for a lot of other things. If we get into a conflict with them and they say, well, we're not selling you any more chips and we have no companies to produce our own, then we're in a world of trouble. So, okay, so you have to be careful about that. Now, having said that, I still wouldn't have done the semiconductor bill that Joe Biden did because we never get anything back from those companies that we give tons of subsidies. I hate the subsidies. So sometimes in a situation like this, you might need a subsidy, but then if that's true, number one, there should be protections for American workers, and there never is, because both the Republicans and the Democrats actually work for the donors and the companies. They don't work for the voters. Otherwise, that's the easiest thing in the world to put in, protection for the workers so they don't get fired.
I agree with you on that.
And by the way, we should get shares of those companies. We're investing into those companies. Why aren't we making money from them? Why do we just have to give it to them as a gift? So that's how I would fix that. But now the third thing that's happened is, and this was my deal breaker on these particular tariffs today on China, both as it relates to Trump and Biden. So Biden gets into office and he says, all right, look, we'll lift the Trump tariffs. We get that it's hurting both of us, right? But obviously you guys have to lift the same tariffs. And China goes, no. So we'll lift some of them, but not all of them. You have to lift it disproportionately. No way. I mean, if I'm president, I draw that red line so thick on that and go, no, brother, this is either going to be even or we're not gonna do it, and I'm gonna go over the top on you. So look, it's enough of China going, I get to have it all my way, okay? But wait, we haven't even gotten to the worst one, but go ahead.
And Biden, to his credit, did draw that red line.
He did, and Trump did too.
Yeah,
okay?
True.
So when Trump got into office, it was not even. So, but nevertheless, you could have too much tariffs that tips things over the edge into massive inflation and massive trade wars. So we've got to be super careful. If I was Biden, what I would have done instead of going in this direction, although I get it, is I would have organized the rest of the world against China and say, guys, we're all gonna say the same thing to China. Either you lower your tariffs or we're all going to increase our tariffs on whatever you've got tariffs on in China for all of our products. Either this is gonna be fair or we're gonna isolate you economically from the rest of the world. And by the way, you can do all that without being belligerent, like militarily. You don't have to say, oh, China virus, and China this, and China that, and we hate them, and we're gonna. No, you don't have to do any of that. Just be like, hey, I'm drawing a red line. That's it. I could do it with a smile on my face, but it doesn't matter. You're not gonna get me to move unless these tariffs are even, okay?
You know what's really interesting? So during that inflationary period where Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was like, oh my God, we need to repeal the tariffs on China. We need to do that. That's gonna help with the inflation situation. When the Biden White House did their own analysis, and they have economic experts looking into it to see, okay, is this true? Can we actually, repeat the results of the analysis that Janet Yellen is providing us? They realized, no, it's actually not gonna cut inflation by much. And the reason why is because by that point, industry had already adapted to the tariffs and they found other ways of manufacturing the products. Now, unfortunately, the manufacturing had just moved to other countries like Vietnam, you mentioned, Mexico's another one, but it happened so quickly. And I do wonder, if we do have those incentives to keep the manufacturing here in the United States or bring the manufacturing here in the United States. And yes, oftentimes when we talk about incentives, it comes in the form of tax cuts or subsidies or whatever. Would we be able to just bring the manufacturing jobs here because there's an incentive to do so?
Yeah, that, by the way, guys, this issue is super complicated because it depends on the industry. So there is no easy black or white here. It's not 0 or 1, it's not binary at all. So the semiconductor industry might need subsidies, but the car industry might not. Or the electric vehicles might need subsidies, but gas-powered cars don't. Or the electric vehicles don't need it, but the lithium batteries need it. So this is the reason you have bureaucrats. The key is to have them be honest bureaucrats, not ones working for corporations, but working for us. So now the two last things are maybe the most important, and they go in different directions. So China is different than Japan, and why I am concerned about them when I wasn't concerned about Japan before. And if any of you are old enough, you might remember, oh my God, Japan bought Rockefeller Center at one point.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, they're gonna take over America. And I kept saying back then to my friends, I'm not worried about a 1%. It's the wrong system, wrong incentives and disincentives. They're gonna bankrupt themselves. It's not gonna work, those particular companies. That's exactly what happened. And then Japan's still a powerful country, but they retrenched, right? So the difference though is China is a country and not individual companies, and they are gigantic. So those $600 billion in subsidies that Anna told you about that Biden wants to do, man, I'm so worried about that. That's our money. But China is doing 4 times that number and has a plan to basically bankrupt almost all of our companies by the year 2050. And then once they do, then they start to slowly increase the prices because now they've got monopoly power. It's actually the Amazon model. It's what Amazon did to a lot of small businesses in this country. And China's trying to do that on a global scale. So it's a huge investment up front. They lose a lot of money in the short term. And so there is a way to defeat that economically. But what you can't do is go, oh, okay, let's see what happens in 2050. No, by that time you'll be wiped out. So you've got to have a smart strategy back. Now, the problem here is America's system is so corrupted by money and politics. What I'm worried about is now all the companies are coming in and going, oh, I need a subsidy too. Oh, you know what? I also need a monopoly here in America. So make sure you ban the Chinese from competing with us. And while you're at it, maybe the Japanese, the Germans, and the French too. So now the companies are sensing blood in the water and they're like, oh, we are going to protect American workers, cut off all of our competition so we can increase prices on American consumers and get subsidies from the taxpayers on top.
Super interesting.
So that's why you have to be really careful, really smart, and actually care about the American consumer to get this done right. Now, when the system is awash with corporate money, do you think they're gonna do that right? Or is Trump gonna go, well, the oil companies gave me a lot of money. They gave me a strong endorsement. Elon Musk, strong endorsement, and Biden and Harris, right? Are they gonna go, oh no, all these giant checks I've been getting, and you know how I outraised Trump 2 to 1 in some periods? Oh no, I don't care about those donors. I don't care that they partly led to my victory. I'll just stand up for the average American. No, it's not gonna happen. So that's why, actually, I hate to do this, But every issue, including something as important as this, at the end of the day, comes back to money and politics. Because if you've got the money in politics, corporations are always going to write these deals to screw us over. And if you actually had honest politicians, there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done here to get America to win and to keep our jobs and to protect our consumers as well.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us. Become a young Turk.